When I answered the phone to ask my son Daniel about his wedding date, my daughter-in-law Chloe stared directly at me and said with an icy smile, "Oh, we actually got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The word struck me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. Me, who for 3 years had paid their $500 monthly rent, purchased every stick of furniture in their home, and stocked their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. I was not a special person. I stood in my own living room, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my eyes while Chloe made herself at home on the sofa I'd bought them. The soft lavender dress I'd chosen for her wedding hung uselessly in my closet, alongside the new shoes and the illusion that I would be part of my only son's most important day. I'd spent $220 on that dress, imagining how nice I'd look in Daniel's wedding photos. Photos I would never be in. Before I continue this heavy story, tell me in the comments what your name is and where you're listening from. I want to know who these brave people are who have the courage to hear the raw truth of life. Because this story I'm about to tell isn't for just anyone. It's a story that will affect you in ways you might never have expected. But I need to tell it because I know there are other women out there going through what I went through. And maybe my courage will give them courage too. Every word I speak here is true. Every detail actually happened, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why it took me so long to have the courage to talk about it. For weeks I had planned every detail. I'd set money aside to give them a $1,200 wedding gift. I'd phoned my sister Margaret in Boston to share the good news. I'd scrubbed my house from top to bottom, thinking they might come celebrate with me afterward. All of it crumbled in an instant with those 3 poisoned words. Only special people. Daniel finally lifted his gaze and said in a rehearsed tone, "Mom, it was an intimate event, very small. Just the 2 of us and our witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I saw the photos online. I saw Chloe's parents beaming beside the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. I saw the white dress I'd helped pay for with the $750 I gave her last month for personal expenses. I saw everything I was never meant to see. A week later, exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Chloe called me with a completely different voice. She was no longer the self-assured woman who had excluded me from her wedding. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Helen, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us. He says if we don't pay this week, he'll evict us. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice shook slightly, as though her world were ending. I was silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I'd rushed to the bank to send that money. All the times I'd canceled my own plans to ensure they had a roof over their heads. All the times I'd eaten simple meals to afford their luxuries. And now, after shutting me out of the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call as if nothing had happened. "Chloe," I said with a calm that surprised me, "didn't I tell you I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was so deep I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years it was not I who was trembling, it was her. "Helen, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. All lies, wrapped in that sugary tone she used only when she needed something. The same voice that had asked for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, the rings, all of which I helped finance, never knowing I wouldn't even witness the ceremony. For years I had tiptoed around, measuring every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I was the perfect mother, the compliant mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when treated as invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something in me that had slept far too long. I calculated how much I'd spent on them over 3 years. Between rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $21,000. $21,000 taken from my retirement, my savings, the money my late husband left so I could live my final years in peace. And what was it for? To be treated like a stranger on my son's wedding day. That night, after hanging up, I sat on my bed and cried. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of pent-up frustration, of years of silent humiliation. I cried for all the times they made me feel my love was a burden, my presence an inconvenience, my money the only thing I was good for. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who saw her as disposable. When I woke the next morning, Something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was something deeper, colder. I stood and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without receiving it. But there was something new in my gaze. A hardness I didn't recognize. A resolve buried under years of compliance. I went to the kitchen and made coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time I didn't think about calling Daniel to ask how he'd slept. I didn't check my phone hoping for an apology. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first thought. I sat at the table where I'd so often planned surprises for them, counted cash for their expenses, and cried silently when met with indifference. Now this table would witness something entirely different. I took out my checkbook, my bank statements, and did the math. I needed to see the exact sum of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $500 multiplied by 36 months. $18,000. Groceries and supplies, roughly $200 a month. Another $7,200. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversaries. At least $3,000. Medical emergencies for Chloe. $850. The car loan they never repaid. $2,700. The air conditioner repair. $550. The living room set. $1,350. $33,650. That was the total of my generosity. $33,650 wasted from my husband's inheritance, my pension, the savings I'd built penny by penny over decades of honest work. All that money thrown away to keep two adults comfortable who couldn't even pretend to respect me. The phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Normally, my heart would race as I rushed to answer, hoping he'd finally apologize and explain it was all a misunderstanding. This time I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. It fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later it rang again. Chloe this time. I let it ring again. Then a text came from Daniel. Mom, please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without replying. At 2 in the afternoon I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a purpose, without an errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the store for their needs, the pharmacy for Chloe's prescriptions. Today I walked simply because I wanted to. I passed the park where I'd often taken Daniel as a boy. I remembered the sweet child who hugged me tightly and said I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When did I start confusing love with money? When did I believe I had to purchase my own son's affection? At the bank, where I'd so often made automatic transfers, I paused before the door. The branch manager, Mr. Evans, saw me through the glass and waved. He'd known me for years. He'd processed every transfer to Daniel and Chloe. He'd watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked straight to his office. Mr. Evans, I said, I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I have set up. He looked surprised. For 3 years, these transfers had been as regular as sunrise. Are you sure, Mrs. Wilkins? Has something happened? His concern felt genuine. More genuine than any interest Daniel had shown in me lately. What happened is that I've finally opened my eyes, I replied. I want to cancel everything, and I'd like information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money. While Mr. Evans processed the cancellations, my phone didn't stop ringing. Daniel, Chloe, Daniel again. It was as if they had a radar for when their funding was threatened. I turned the phone off completely. Mrs. Wilkins, Mr. Evans said as he handed me the papers, forgive me for intruding, but over the years I've seen you be incredibly generous with your family. I hope you're not being pressured into making these changes. His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond transactions, showed more care for my well-being than my own son. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Evans. On the contrary, I've finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I'd left a great burden in that office. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial duty to people who saw me as a resource, not a person. I went home and thought about all the things I hadn't done to please Daniel and Chloe, the trips I'd skipped to save money for them, the friends I'd lost touch with because I was always on call for their emergencies, The hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar spent on myself was one less for their wants. When I arrived home, I found 3 cars parked outside. Daniel's, Chloe's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I'd given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day care for me as I'd cared for them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door to a scene I will never forget. Daniel sat on my sofa with his head in his hands. Chloe paced like a caged animal. An older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. What's going on here? I asked, my voice louder than I intended. All 3 looked at me as if I were the intruder. Chloe spoke first, her voice full of that desperate urgency I'd heard on the phone. Helen, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Dawson is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? I asked, calm surprising me. What situation? I'm perfectly fine. Daniel finally lifted his head. His eyes, once innocent, now reflected financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank. They said you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Evans said you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did this. Mr. Dawson, a man in his 50s with a gray suit and an unconvincing smile, approached with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Wilkins, I'm Mr. Dawson, an attorney specializing in family law. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went to the table and gathered my private papers. These are my personal documents. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Daniel cut in with that condescending tone he perfected. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been strange lately. First, you cut us off financially without explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Chloe approached and tried to take my hand with fake tenderness. Helen, sweetie, we know you've been under stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm. Now I understood why they brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about declaring me mentally incompetent to take control of my finances. The same woman who told me they only invited special people to their wedding was now treating me like a senile old woman. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced them all. I am clearer than I've been in years, and you will leave my house now. Mr. Dawson interjected with that reasonable tone lawyers use. Mrs. Wilkins, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that escaped me was harsh, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding my money belongs to me? Deciding not to finance 2 adults who treat me like garbage? Chloe jumped as if I'd slapped her. We've never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We're just speeding up the process. There it was, the naked truth. Everything I had would one day be theirs. In their minds I was already dead, and they were just collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 20 years or 20 days left. To them, I was an ATM that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All 3 of you, get out of my house. Daniel stood with the angry face of a child denied his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't cut us off overnight. I can't. My voice rose for the first time. Who says I can't? For years I've paid rent that wasn't in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a home where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Dawson took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my table. Mrs. Wilkins, we've prepared documents to facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Daniel and Chloe to manage your finances more efficiently. This would be temporary until you're feeling better. I took the folder and, without opening it, threw it directly into the trash. The only transition happening here is yours to the front door. Chloe began to cry, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Helen. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I've decided my money is better used in my own life, I'm suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Daniel tried to step closer, but I moved back. He was no longer the boy who ran into my arms after a nightmare. He was a 34-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle to a comfortable life funded by someone else. Mom, we made mistakes, he said in a voice meant to sound remorseful. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Chloe was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable again. Reasonable. The word tasted bitter. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger. It means pretending it doesn't hurt to be excluded from the most important day of my only son's life. Mr. Dawson packed his papers with the efficiency of someone used to rejection. Mrs. Wilkins, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health issues, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words hit like a physical blow. I realized this wasn't just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. They wanted to declare me incompetent to manage my own affairs. Mr. Dawson, I said, looking him straight in the eye, I suggest you do your homework before threatening a 70-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week supported 2 fully capable adults. Chloe stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally revealed her true face. This isn't the end of this, Helen. We have rights and we have lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to fund your legal tantrums. The 3 of them walked to the door with the wounded dignity of people unaccustomed to being told no. Before leaving, Daniel turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end badly for you. You'll end up alone with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Daniel, I said with deep sadness but crystalline clarity, I am already alone. The difference is now it's by my choice, not your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room surrounded by the most beautiful silence I'd heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. That night I couldn't sleep, but not from sadness or regret, from the adrenaline of having reclaimed control of my life. I lay awake planning my next steps like a general preparing for battle. If Daniel and Chloe wanted a fight, I would give them a war, one I'd fight with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 the next morning I was dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of Mr. Wallace, a lawyer I'd met years ago when handling my husband's will. Unlike Mr. Dawson, Mr. Wallace had an impeccable reputation and specialized in protecting the rights of seniors. Mrs. Wilkins, he said as I explained the situation, what your children attempted yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a crime. The fact that they entered your home without permission and went through your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words both comforted and alarmed me. They confirmed I wasn't crazy. What had happened was truly abusive, but they also made me realize the situation was more serious than I'd thought. We need to document everything, Mr. Wallace continued. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We'll also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Wallace whistled softly when he saw the total. Mrs. Wilkins, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you fully financed 2 adults who didn't respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I left Mr. Wallace's office, I had a plan. First, change all the locks. Second, install a security system with cameras. Third, open a new bank account at a different institution. Fourth, start living the life I postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Jenkins, had known me for years because I was always buying things for Daniel and Chloe's apartment. Mrs. Wilkins, what brings you in today? Another emergency with your son? He asked with the familiarity of someone who'd silently witnessed my wasted generosity. No, Mr. Jenkins. This time it's for my own home. I need to change all the locks, the best quality you have. He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son Liam, who installed security systems, happened to stop by. Felt like Providence. Liam, I said. I also need a full surveillance system installed. Price is not an issue. While they prepared everything for installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Chloe, calling from someone else's phone since I blocked hers after the confrontation. Helen, it's Chloe. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I said dryly. Listen, I know you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Daniel and I have talked and we want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner to celebrate with you? We could do it at your house, cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so obvious I almost laughed. Chloe, how much rent do you owe exactly? The silence confirmed I'd hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Helen. We really miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or my money? I asked directly. Both, she replied with surprising honesty. Helen, I won't lie. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer, never. Chloe, I'll only explain this once. For 3 years, you've treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst way. Now that the money has stopped, you suddenly discover you love me. Helen, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned off my phone completely. I didn't want more interruptions on my day of liberation. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't visited in over a year. I'd always canceled my appointments because Daniel or Chloe needed something urgent, or because the money I'd set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Wilkins, my hairstylist Sophia called out. What a surprise. I thought you'd forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Sophia. I just forgot that I deserved to be pampered too. I treated myself to the full works. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without guilt. While Sophia worked on my hair, she told me about her life, her children, her dreams. It was refreshing to have a conversation that didn't revolve around Daniel and Chloe's needs. You look beautiful, Mrs. Wilkins, she said when she was done. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Sophia. I finally learned to say no. When I got home that afternoon, there was an unfamiliar car parked outside. My heart raced for a moment, thinking Daniel and Chloe might have returned with reinforcements. But as I got closer, I saw an older woman sitting on my porch steps. Mrs. Wilkins? She asked as I got out of the car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Vance. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years but never really talked. Yesterday, I heard raised voices in your home and grew concerned. Is everything all right? Her genuine concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Vance. I'll make coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. As I make coffee, I told her everything. Eleanor listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Wilkins, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my son 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to fund his adult life. I also believed he wouldn't love me if I didn't give him money. What happened? I cut off the money when I realized he only called when he needed something. At first it was terrible threats, emotional blackmail, guilt trips. But after 6 months, my son called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship based on love, not money. Her words gave me hope. Do you think Daniel and Chloe will ever understand? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Wilkins. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about whether Daniel and Chloe had money for rent, food, or their whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future. and I slept better than I had in years. The next day, Liam and Mr. Jenkins came at 8 to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone rang repeatedly from unknown numbers. Chloe was still trying to reach me from different phones, but I'd developed a new skill: ignoring calls that didn't serve me. "Mrs. Wilkins," Liam said as he installed the cameras, "this system will give you complete peace of mind. You can see who's at your door from your phone, even when you're not here. And if someone enters without permission, an alert goes straight to the police." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son, but it didn't hurt as much as it once would have. It was simply a practical step to safeguard my newfound peace. While they worked, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years: call my sister Margaret in Boston. We'd lost touch because every conversation became a financial report disguised as family news. How much I'd spent on Daniel and Chloe, how proud I was to help them. "Helen," Margaret answered, surprised. "Sis, how are you? We haven't spoken in months." "I'm good, Margaret. Better than good. I'm calling to tell you I've finally come to my senses." I told her the whole story. Margaret listened in silence. When I finished, her response surprised me. "Helen, it's about time. Every time we talked, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars." I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how. "What did you want to tell me?" "That Daniel never spoke lovingly about you at family gatherings. It was always Mom helped me with this or Mom bought me that. Never I miss my mom or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person." Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like cleaning an infected wound. "You know what else I noticed?" Margaret continued. "Chloe always spoke about you in the future tense. When Helen is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we'll invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live." This revelation hit me like ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM, they saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. After talking with Margaret, I sat in my kitchen processing it all. 35 years raising my son alone after my husband's death. 3 years financing 2 adults who saw me as a financial obstacle. The doorbell rang. On the new cameras, I saw it was Eleanor with a mug in her hands. I opened the door, and she handed me freshly brewed coffee. "I thought you might need company after everything you shared yesterday," she said with a sincere smile I'd already come to appreciate. We sat in my living room, and Eleanor told me more about her experience. "My son said the exact same things Chloe says to you. You're like a second mom to me. We're special to you. Everything will be ours one day anyway." Those are rehearsed lines, Mrs. Wilkins. They learned them from the Emotional Manipulation Handbook. "Do you think such a handbook actually exists?" I asked, half joking. "Not officially, but it seems everyone reads from the same book." Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Create constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. When she resists, question her mental health. We laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. It was both funny and tragic to recognize such predictable patterns in our own children's behavior. "Did you ever feel guilty for cutting off the money?" I asked Eleanor. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she answered honestly. "But then I started seeing results. My son had to get a second job. His wife stopped shopping constantly and started looking for work. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned I was a person, not a resource." That afternoon, I decided to do something I'd put off for years: visit my husband's grave. I'd always made excuses not to go. Daniel or Chloe needed something, or the taxi fare was better spent on one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked slightly neglected because I hadn't cleaned it in months. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and talked to him as if he could hear me. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Daniel. I wanted to be the perfect mother, thinking he'd grow up without a father, but I think I forgot to be myself in the process." The wind blew gently, and for a moment I felt he was listening. "Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this and I didn't want to see it. His wife, well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I've learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with fresh ones, and stayed another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing home to solve a crisis for Daniel and Chloe. When I returned home, there were 3 cars parked outside again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The cameras showed Daniel, Chloe, and 2 other people I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed agitated, talking and pointing at my house. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I called Mr. Wallace. They're at my house again. This time with more people. What should I do? Stay in your car, Mrs. Wilkins. I'm on my way and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They're not allowed on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Wallace and 2 police cars arrived. I watched the officers speak with Daniel and Chloe. I saw my son gesture angrily. I saw Chloe crying again, but this time her tears didn't move me. One officer approached my car. Ma'am, you can exit safely. Your visitors are leaving immediately. As I got out, Daniel shouted from the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son. Daniel, I replied with a calm that surprised me. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mother like an ATM. Chloe screamed from across the street. You'll pay for this. We have bills you co-signed. You can't just abandon us like this. Mr. Wallace interjected. Any future communication must go through my office. And I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats. My client has full documentation of all payments she voluntarily made over 3 years. I watched them drive away, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time I felt confident. I had professional help. I had emotional support from Eleanor. And most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and wrong. That night, Eleanor invited me to dinner at her home. I met her daughter, who was visiting, and saw firsthand what a healthy family relationship looked like. They spoke respectfully, asked sincerely about each other's lives, and laughed together. Her daughter didn't ask for money once all evening. I wanted that with Daniel too, I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter left. And maybe you'll have it one day, she replied. But first he has to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about the future. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The cameras showed Daniel and Chloe driving by my house several times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking briefly without getting out. It was as if they were studying my routine, waiting for their next move. Mr. Wallace had advised me to document every visit, so I kept a detailed log. Their persistence will work in our favor, he'd said. Every time they show up after being told not to, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, I was calmly eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. The camera showed a well-dressed young woman with a folder and a professional smile. I didn't recognize her, but her posture suggested this wasn't a social call. Good morning, Mrs. Helen Wilkins, she said as I opened the door. I'm a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation and need to conduct a wellness check. My blood ran cold. Daniel and Chloe had escalated things. This was no longer just private lawyer threats. Now they'd involved the government. May I see your identification? I asked, staying calm. Of course. She showed an official ID that looked genuine. I'm Ms. Roberts. May I come in and speak with you? I let her in, knowing refusal would look worse for my case. Ms. Roberts sat in my living room and took out a form. Mrs. Wilkins, we've received reports that you've shown significant changes in financial behavior, cut off communication with family, and shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told you've refused medical and legal help from loved ones. Every word was carefully chosen to make me sound mentally disturbed. I recognized Chloe's hand in the wording. She'd always been skilled at manipulating words to get what she wanted. Ms. Roberts, I said with all the dignity I could muster, I'd like to call my lawyer before answering any questions. Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation, it's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to speak with me. The phrase, if you have nothing to hide, infuriated me. It was the logic abusers used to justify invasion of privacy. Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait or come back another day. But I won't answer questions without legal representation. I called Mr. Wallace, and he was there within 20 minutes. When he saw the social worker, his expression hardened. Ms. Roberts, he said after checking her ID, I hope you have a court order to be here. My client is under my representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment. Sir, Ms. Roberts replied with less confidence, we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate. What family? Mr. Wallace asked dryly. The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her home without permission? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money. Mr. Wallace took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. Here is complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,650 taken from her accounts over 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If anyone needs investigating, it's not my client. Ms. Roberts reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. Clearly, the information she'd been given didn't match the reality before her. Mrs. Wilkins, she said finally, can you explain why you abruptly stopped financial support for your son? Because I finally realized they were using me, I replied simply. Because I understood that to them I wasn't a mother, I was a bank account. Because I was tired of financing people who saw me as an obstacle. But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family? The question outraged me. Ms. Roberts, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, to give him tools to be independent. My son is 34, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life isn't my responsibility. It's my choice. And I've chosen to stop. Mr. Wallace interjected. Ms. Roberts, would you consider it normal for a 34-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without help from his 70-year-old mother? Ms. Roberts didn't answer immediately. I could see her reevaluating the situation. Mrs. Wilkins, she asked after a moment, do you manage your finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, investments, tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my home clean. I care for myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with neighbors. Do you take any medications? Just vitamins and occasional aspirin. I have no medical conditions requiring medication. Mr. Wallace added, my client recently underwent extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical health. Ms. Roberts closed her folder. Mrs. Wilkins, based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or need intervention. I will close this case. After she left, Mr. Wallace and I sat in silence for a few minutes. Helen, he said finally, this will continue to escalate. Daniel and Chloe are spending money. They don't have to hire professionals to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're desperate? Exactly. They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could take control of my money. They could try, Mr. Wallace continued. But we have solid evidence that you're fully competent and that they're motivated by greed, not genuine concern. That afternoon, I called Margaret to vent. Sis, she said after hearing my story, see how far they're willing to go for money? They're risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their reputation, all to access your bank account again. Her words made me think. Daniel and Chloe had revealed their true nature. There was no going back, no possibility of genuine reconciliation. To them, I had never been a mother or respected mother-in-law. I had always been money. This revelation, though painful, was liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. They had proven that my emotional and physical well-being mattered less to them than my money. That evening, Eleanor visited with a surprise. She'd invited her friends from her book club to meet me. Helen, she introduced me, These are my friends Grace, Marie, Carol, and Beatrice. We've all been through similar situations with abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. Grace had set boundaries with a brother who constantly asked for money. Carol had cut ties with a daughter who only visited when she needed something. Beatrice had changed her will after learning her grandchildren saw her as their retirement plan. What hurts most, I confessed, isn't losing the money I gave them. It's realizing I never had the love I thought I did. Helen, Beatrice said with the wisdom of her 80 years, true love can't be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were balm for my wounded soul. She was right. I bought attention, not love. I'd financed an illusion. You know what I've discovered? I told my new friends. That loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being alone. At least now when I'm alone, I'm in good company. Everyone laughed, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. That night after my friends left, I sat in my garden thinking. The stars shone brighter than ever, or perhaps I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially independent. I had no dependents, no financial obligations to anyone but myself. And instead of frightening me, this excited me. I could travel when I wanted, remodel my home, buy nice clothes, donate to charities that mattered, invest in my own future instead of financing the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years I wanted to plan my future. A month after the social worker's visit, I thought I'd finally won. I'd settled into a beautiful routine. I enjoyed leisurely breakfasts reading the paper. I tended my garden. I lunched with Eleanor, one of my new friends. In the afternoons, I devoted myself to activities I'd given up for years. I'd started painting again, something I loved before becoming Daniel and Chloe's personal financier. But on a Thursday morning, as I painted flowers on my new easel, Mr. Wallace arrived with a grim expression that chilled my blood. Helen, we need to talk. Daniel and Chloe have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They're requesting a legal guardian be assigned to you. The words fell like stones. I knew it was possible, but hearing it aloud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines you're unable to manage your affairs, yes. He could place Daniel as your legal guardian, giving him full control over your finances. I sat heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal of my life. My own son was trying to have me declared incompetent to steal my money. Mr. Wallace, what evidence could they have? You've seen I'm completely competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses claiming you've behaved erratically. They've submitted unpaid doctor's bills you supposedly neglected and medications you supposedly hoarded without taking. But that's a lie. I have no outstanding bills or hoarded medications. I know, Helen, but they've fabricated convincing evidence. They also have a statement from a Dr. Lowe stating you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They turned my refusal to undergo an unnecessary exam into proof of mental illness. They'd used my instinct to protect myself as evidence I needed protection. Who are the 3 witnesses? Mr. Wallace checked his documents. Chloe, of course. A neighbor named Mr. Peterson. And someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Mr. Clark. Mr. Peterson was the neighbor across the street. An unpleasant man who'd always had issues with me because my friends sometimes parked near his house. Mr. Clark was indeed my pharmacist, but I didn't understand what he could have against me. I need to speak with Mr. Clark, I told Mr. Wallace. Something isn't right. We went to the pharmacy that afternoon. Mr. Clark looked surprised and nervous. Mrs. Wilkins, good to see you. How are you? Mr. Clark, I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with my medications. His face turned red. Mrs. Wilkins, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago asking about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. What did you tell her? I explained you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you have no regular prescriptions. But she insisted this was proof you weren't taking proper care of your health. Mr. Wallace interjected. Mr. Clark, did you sign a paper? She brought a document saying I confirmed Mrs. Wilkins had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for health insurance. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked into signing something he didn't fully understand. Chloe's manipulation knew no bounds. Mr. Clark, I need you to write a statement explaining what happened and clarifying that I have no medication problems. Of course, Mrs. Wilkins. I'm terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. After the pharmacy, we confronted Mr. Peterson. When we knocked, he answered with obvious hostility. What do you want? Mr. Peterson, Mr. Wallace said. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. And I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you specify what behaviors you observed? Installing cameras like she lives in a war zone, having strangers over all the time, yelling at her family in the street. I realized Mr. Peterson had taken everything out of context. The cameras were for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The yelling was me defending my home from invasions. Mr. Peterson, I said, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say, he replied cruelly. There was no reasoning with him. His statement was based on superficial observations maliciously interpreted. That evening, Mr. Wallace and I planned our defense. Helen, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Morris, an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm you're fully competent. What if Daniel and Chloe have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they've already decided to declare me incompetent? Helen, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motives. We will fight this. The next day I saw Dr. Morris. She was a woman in her 50s with kind but sharp eyes. Mrs. Wilkins, I'll ask questions and give tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours she asked about my memory, reasoning, financial understanding, and emotional health. She gave cognitive tests and had me solve math and logic problems. Mrs. Wilkins, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this appears to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think. I left feeling validated but sad. Professional confirmation of my mental health was a relief, but it also confirmed the lawsuit was real and necessary. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with our book club friends. When I told them about the incompetence lawsuit, everyone was outraged. Helen, Grace said, we'll testify for you. We've been with you for weeks. Anyone can see you're doing great. Better than great, Marie added. You're clearer and stronger than many 40-year-olds I know. Beatrice, with her 80-year wisdom, took my hands. Helen, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare parents insane to get their money. But you have something many victims didn't. Documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you. Her words gave me hope. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had an army of strong women who'd witnessed my transformation. You know what the saddest part is? I said. Daniel and Chloe are willing to destroy any chance of future reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything so far, there's no coming back from this. And maybe that's for the best, Marie replied. At least now you know exactly who they are and can act accordingly. That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I truly cried. Not from sadness but from grief. I said goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love was returned. But something new also emerged within me. An iron determination not to be stripped of my money, my dignity, or my freedom. The war had officially begun, and I was ready to fight. The trial came 3 weeks later. I woke early, put on my best navy suit, and looked in the mirror with determination I'd never felt before. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, my dignity as a person, my right to live free from abuse, my value beyond my bank account would be judged. Mr. Wallace came at 7 to review our strategy. Helen, remember, the burden of proof is on them. They must prove you're incompetent. We just need to show you're not. And if the judge is biased? Judge Miller has a reputation for fairness. I researched his cases. He doesn't automatically favor families. He's dedicated to protecting seniors' rights. We arrived at the courthouse at 9. In the hallway, I saw Daniel in a new suit probably bought for the occasion and Chloe dressed in black as if at a funeral. Maybe it was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Daniel avoided my gaze, but Chloe held it with a coldness confirming this was just business. Their lawyer was an older, elegant man with the confidence of someone who'd won similar cases. His opening statement portrayed me as a confused old woman manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. Your Honor, he said solemnly, Mrs. Helen Wilkins has shown clear mental decline recently. She cut off financial support without rational explanation. She installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoia and isolated herself from loved ones under the influence of neighbors and lawyers taking advantage of her vulnerability. Every word was chosen to make my self-empowerment sound like dementia and my freedom like external manipulation. They called their witnesses first. Chloe testified, and her performance was Oscar-worthy. She cried describing how I'd changed, become hostile and paranoid, isolated myself from the family that loved me. Your Honor, she said tremulously, Helen has always been like a second mother. Seeing her mental decline has been devastating. We just want her to get the care she needs. Lies wrapped in convincing tears. When Mr. Wallace cross-examined her, cracks appeared. Mrs. Schultz, when was the last time you called my client without asking for money? Chloe stammered. We always talked about many things. Can you give a specific date? I don't remember exact dates. Is it true you married without inviting my client? It was a very small ceremony. Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you said you'd only invited special people? Chloe's face reddened. Those words were taken out of context. What context makes telling your mother-in-law she's not special acceptable? She couldn't answer convincingly. Daniel was next. Seeing him on the stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the boy I'd raised alone, the one I'd dedicated my life to. Mom has always been generous, he testified. But lately, she's become erratic. We believe she's being manipulated. When Mr. Wallace cross-examined him, the mask fell. Mr. Wilkins, how much money have you received from your mother in 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,650 sound right? Maybe. She's always been generous. How many times have you visited your mother without asking for money? Silence. Is it true you broke into her home without permission and went through her private documents? We were worried. Is it true you brought a lawyer to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help manage her finances. Do you, at 34, need your 70-year-old mother's help to pay rent? Daniel couldn't answer with dignity. Mr. Peterson testified about my supposed erratic behaviors, but under cross-examination, he admitted he'd never spoken to me directly and all his information was based on superficial observations. A Dr. Lowe testified that my refusal to be evaluated was proof of mental decline. But Mr. Wallace submitted our evaluation with Dr. Morris, which completely refuted his conclusions. Then it was our turn. Mr. Wallace first called Mr. Clark, my pharmacist, who explained how he'd been tricked into signing a distorted statement. Dr. Morris testified about my excellent mental state and presented flawless cognitive test results. Mr. Jenkins from the hardware store testified about my mental competence, explaining that my decisions to cancel transfers were rational and processed correctly. Eleanor and my book club friends testified about my clarity, vitality, and ability to maintain healthy social relationships. Finally, it was my turn. I stood with dignity and walked to the stand, feeling the weight of 70 years of experience, wisdom gained through pain, strength discovered in adversity. Mr. Wallace guided me through my testimony, letting me tell my whole story. The $33,650 spent over 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant manipulation, the privacy violation, the legal threats. Mrs. Wilkins, Mr. Wallace finally asked, why did you stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them wasn't love, I replied clearly. It was a commercial transaction disguised as family relationship. My money was welcome. I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret it took me so long to make it. Daniel's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during cross-examination, but I answered every question with clarity and precision. When he implied my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect, not financial interest. In his closing argument, Daniel's lawyer insisted I was a victim of external manipulation. Mr. Wallace's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, what we've seen is not the case of an incompetent elderly woman but of a woman who has found the strength to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no real medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they've presented is frustration because their income source has chosen to exercise her legal right to protect her resources. Judge Miller deliberated for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was serious but clear. After reviewing all evidence, he began, it is clear to this court that Mrs. Helen Wilkins is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, however painful for her family, are rational and within her rights. My heart beat faster. Furthermore, the judge continued, evidence suggests this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Wilkins's well-being. The court denies the request for guardianship in its entirety. I had won. I'd won not just the lawsuit, but my freedom, my dignity, my right to live free from abuse by those who supposedly loved me. As we left the courthouse, I saw Daniel and Chloe arguing angrily with their lawyer. Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred before turning away. Daniel looked at me one last time and for a second I thought I saw regret, but it was too late. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration at my home with all our friends. We toasted to justice, to freedom, to the sisterhood of strong women supporting each other. Helen, Beatrice told me, today you didn't just win a trial, you won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live without fear, guilt, or manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a lovely apartment near downtown. I donated half my money to organizations protecting seniors from family abuse. With the other half, I began living the life I'd always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Daniel or Chloe again. I heard through others they'd moved to a smaller apartment and Chloe had gotten a job for the first time in years. Perhaps adversity would teach them what my generosity couldn't, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is gone. In her place is someone who has learned a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. I created an informal support group for women with disabilities that has already helped dozens of people report abuse, get out of toxic relationships, and rebuild their lives with dignity. Every week I receive messages from women who managed to free themselves from horrible situations after participating in our meetings. It's my way of transforming pain into purpose, trauma into life mission. My story proves that no matter how old you are, no matter how many traumas you've suffered, no matter how many times you've fallen, it's always possible to start over. The important thing is to never give up, to seek help when you need it, to believe that you deserve good things in life, that you deserve respect, caring, dignity, and most importantly, never let those who hurt you continue to have power over you. I am Helen Wilkins. I'm 72 years old. I live here in Atherton, and this is the story of my life, of how the worst trauma transformed me into the strongest woman I know. If you want more stories of overcoming like mine, subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel. Here we prove that there's no age to start over, and that the sweetest revenge is to live well. So, did you like my story? Today I feel victorious because I strived as best I could to overcome all difficulties. If you can, click on the squares that are passing on the screen to see more videos and hear more stories of warrior women like me. You'll be surprised at the strength that we American women have to overcome anything that life puts in our way. Life teaches that whoever sows wind reaps storm and whoever sows evil one day pays the price.